Okay, so things you should know. The first thing you should know is that range anxiety is a thing of the past. So range anxiety is this fear that you're going to suddenly run out of charge and you're going to be stuck in the middle of the highway. And it doesn't happen for a couple of reasons. The first is that the vehicle manufacturers know that that's your worst fear, so they have invested pretty heavily in making sure that doesn't happen. So first of all, the range of the electric vehicles that are on the market today is far and above what most people drive in a day. So most people drive somewhere between 30 and 50 miles a day. The all-electric vehicles that are being bought right now have more than 200 miles of range. And then there are still plug-in hybrids where you can get more than 25 or 30 miles per charge, and you can cover most of your daily driving on electricity. But then there is that backup gas tank when you go on a longer trip. So there really is a good electric car for most people's needs out on the market today. But the second reason is that the software, the battery management software on these cars is very sophisticated. So when you're driving an electric car, at any time you can see how many miles of range you have left before you need to charge. And most of these cars are really smart about calculating that estimate, so they'll take into account the weather or the temperature because batteries operate more efficiently at certain temperatures than others. And some of these cars will even take into account your driving style. So if the car has learned that you are not an efficient driver, that you accelerate needlessly and then slam on the brakes needlessly, it'll adjust down your range estimate to meet your driving style. So you're never going to be suddenly surprised that you only have 5 miles of range left, because at all times, front and center, you can see exactly how many miles you have remaining. That brings me to this sort of second biggest question that people have about electric cars, which is, how do I charge? The good news, it's not as complicated as most people fear. So there are 3 basic levels of charging. The first is called level 1. It's also called a trickle charge because it's the slowest level. But basically, this is when you take the cord that comes with the car and plug it into the same kind of outlet you would plug your cell phone into. It generally adds about 4 miles of range per hour spent charging. And people tend to dismiss it offhand because that sounds really slow. But if you are lucky enough to own a home or live somewhere where you can charge overnight, if you drive 40 miles in a day and your car is parked for 10 hours overnight, that is enough to replenish what you've used in that day. So a lot of people are actually using level 1 charging or start off by trying it and then realize that it's actually enough for what they do. So I would just encourage you to not dismiss it out of hand. The next step up is called level 2 charging. It charges at 240 volts and uses the same kind of outlet that a electric dryer, for example, would use. It adds anywhere from 10 to 25 miles of range per hour spent charging, so it's a fair amount faster. If you want to install this at home, you just buy a unit online or at a home improvement store and then have an electrician hook it up to a 240 volt outlet. In some houses, that means bringing a 240 volt line over to where you park your car. But we have a whole guide on our website about how to think about doing that if you need to. But level 2 is also the kind of charging that you're seeing increasingly at libraries or supermarkets or malls or places that you are already spending a fair amount of time parked. The third level of charging is called DC fast charging. It adds a lot of miles in a short amount of time and is the closest we can get to the experience of pulling up to a gas station. So on the Chevy Bolt, for example, you can add 90 miles of range in 30 minutes. On some of the Teslas, you can get over 120 miles in 30 minutes. But this is the type of charging that you would do on a road trip. So if you're driving more miles than the range of your car can cover on just one charge, you can stop at a rest area, stretch your legs, get a cup of coffee, and in that amount of time, add a significant chunk of miles to your range. So this is not the kind of charging you would install at your home. On plug types, the first thing to know is that Tesla has its own proprietary system. So Tesla vehicles have Tesla chargers, and you can only use a Tesla charger if you own a Tesla vehicle. Tesla has invested a ton in making sure that they have a charging network that covers the whole country. So you drive from here to California and back in a Tesla, and it's absolutely fine. Everybody else relies on the same standard for level 1 and level 2 charging, and that's the J1772, which you see in your top right-hand corner. So what that means is no matter what other electric car you buy, that's the port that you use for level 1 and level 2. For DC fast charging, there's currently a split in the industry that is narrowing with time. So right now, American and European manufacturers use the SAE combo design for the DC fast charging, which is in the middle on the right. And Asian manufacturers have, up until this point, used the CHAdeMO plug, which is on the bottom right. Nissan actually just announced that it is going to be switching to the SAE combo for the American market moving forward, which will simplify things for consumers and charging network operators. But for now, there is still that split. The good news is that basically every DC fast charging station out there has a cord for each plug type. So it's very rare that you're going to be stranded at a station that doesn't have the plug type that your car supports. Speaking of installing charging, this is the guide that I just mentioned. We wrote it both with the intention of being useful to people who already have an electric car and are trying to figure out what the right charging constellation is for them, but also for people who are thinking about maybe getting a car and wondering whether their home can support it. So it has some sections about things you should know, questions you should ask yourself, questions you might want to ask an electrician first, and we think it's quite helpful, so we hope you think it's helpful too. So I mentioned road trips, and it is absolutely possible to go on road trips in an electric car. We actually have a blog post written by one of our EV ambassadors before COVID hit about the 8,000-mile trip he took in his all-electric Kia Niro EV, going from here to Arizona or New Mexico, I can't remember which, and back, and what it was like charging along that trip. So it's definitely possible. The website that we recommend if you're trying to get a sense of what charging looks like out there is called PlugShare. So there are a lot of different companies that are building out charging station networks, and you can find their specific charging stations on their proprietary websites. So if you want to see where ChargePoint stations are, you can go to the ChargePoint website. If you want to see where EVgo stations are, you can go to the EVgo website. We like PlugShare because it puts everything on the same map. It's a crowdsourced resource, so as new stations get built, users can put them on this map. And you can plug in any address and see what the charging is around there. So in these two maps, anything that's green is a level 2 charger, and everything that's orange is a DC fast charger. It's a kind of website where as you zoom in, more dots will pop up. So I definitely encourage you to poke around, maybe put in some addresses of places that you visit. They also have a trip planning function where you can put in a starting point and a destination. It'll show you what the charging options are along the route. It's also a lovely place where all the enthusiastic EV drivers write notes to each other about which stations are working or post photos if it's hard to find. So it's a really great resource both as you're learning about electric cars, but also when you have one and you're driving around looking for charging. So these maps are getting filled in more and more as time progresses, both because the companies that are in this space are building out more stations, but also because our electric utilities are helping support this build out. So there are lots and lots more stations coming over time.